Hello everyone, Silver Contrail here once again, doing another article aftermath video, this time on my last week's video, which was on Madolche, probably one of the larger dark horse picks of the format, something that I don't see as many people playing as they definitely could, and of course we had that actually pair of articles on Madolche coming from Doug Zeef and Alexander Thomas making it very, very far in the WCQ with Madolche, main decking a lot of cool stuff. Triple Maxi, triple Effect Veiler in a deck that plays actually quite a bit of back row. It was really neat to see. Now, the deck is just really strong, and if you do encounter it at locals, it can actually be somewhat surprising and a bit of a struggle to get over. And that's, of course, something I'm trying to hit upon as we move towards the end of the format. We're down to about just over a month left in this format before we get to September, and then things change again. We've got Judgment of the Light just around the corner. Very, very soon we're going to have that come out. There's some new stuff in there that we'll want to talk about. Some new archetypes, some new decks that are going to be that we're going to need to side against. And I can't say with Judgment of the Light we're going to have a big change in how the game runs right now. Even some of the new archetypes in there just don't really compete with dragons, with prophecy, and I guess with Yaksha coming out. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. I have no idea actually. And Wolfberg, however it's pronounced, the new translation is. So there's a lot of new stuff coming out, and certainly Rooster, Firefist Rooster. That's going to change some things. It's basically like a bunch of cards we're getting as imports that we should have gotten in Cosmo Blazer. They would have been more relevant then, and maybe Firefist would have been a bit more competitive in the current format. And I mean, if in September, if Tenki goes to 1 or something, it's not going to completely decimate the deck, but it would have been interesting to see that deck run around with triple Tenki and the triple Rooster, but we'll see what happens. Maybe they're giving us Rooster because Tenki's going to go to 1, but banlist speculation, that's going to be more later on. And I'll probably stick that mostly to this, and as we go forward to the ban list, I'm pretty much just going to talk about it on here. I'm not going to try to mention it in my articles, never do. Of course, it gets increasingly difficult to talk about the side deck when we don't know what the next format's going to look like. So anyways, back to Madolche. Of course, they did really good at the qualifier, and I had a ton of fun going to the World Championship qualifier. I went with Dragonity, ended up playing some more for fun stuff, and I'll have an article for that actually coming up next week on something that I did there that was really fun. It was really cool. Something that was a sort of a once in a great while chance. I don't really get to do something. Not a lot of players got to do what I was able to do or take part in. And it was a ton of fun. And yeah, I'll be talking about that more later on. And there's a lot of stories that came out of that, and I'd love to share them all, but I just don't have time to do it. From cannibalistic seagulls to just the mayhem that went down at the WCQ, this Nintendo Utopia we found while we were walking around, and a bunch of other stuff. And then today, recording this literally just before my article goes up, and Dueling Network's down. It's causing a little bit of drama there. But anyways, yeah, Madolche. Something someone brought up was that I suggested putting in compulsory evacuation device, or actually taking it out when you go into this matchup. Now, Madolche still rely a bit on their Xyz monsters to problem solve, to do their nonsense with Invoker and all that stuff. But the problem with compulsory is that you really are restricted in what you can use it against, because you're not going to flip it and kick their monster back to their hand. There's pretty much no benefit ever for doing this, especially if they control Ticket. You do that, they're going to get a free search on Ticket, you just -2 to yourself. Nobody likes doing that. Even if you're preserving your play, unless you're pretty much going to win next turn, doing something like that can very well cost you the duel. because you kick back a Messengelado, they search their cat. You kick back uh, Hoot Cake, they're gonna search something else. Basically, you don't want to ever do that. It's kind of dumb. But you do want to use something against their synchro monsters. You don't want to just let them make Tiramisu or MX Saber Invoker and then go off and do shenanigans. So the reason I suggest taking it out is that, of course, you have to replace it with things that answer those threats that don't return cards to hand. That includes stuff, even some more techie stuff maybe, but that includes things like Bottomless Trap Hole. That includes things like potentially Torrential Tribute. Um, you can look at stuff like even Blackhorn of Heaven as an option, or just like more effect negation stuff like Fiendish Chain, more breakthrough skills, those sorts of things, to at least shut them off for a turn, make them detach, and then whatever. In this matchup, Bottomless Trap was really, really good. It hits pretty much everything if Chateau is face up, except like Miafio. I don't know how to say it. The cat, the adorable kitten. Uh, it's it's uh it's just a really good card in that matchup, and obviously, if you're able to run like Dimensional Prison or Dimensional Fissure, Macrocosmos, you get sort of that same effect where you're banishing things instead of sending them to the graveyard. They're not going to trigger, which is obviously awesome. And it won't trigger Chateau or Ticket. So, yeah, I would take Compulsory out if you've got options in your extra deck. Maybe you have some sided cards that might be a little bit better. I just find that it's really subpar in that matchup, and its uses are a lot more limited than you normally would expect. And there are definitely options you can go to and use that are alternatives and frequently a lot better. Now, the other thing I mentioned. Just checking the comments again, trying to double check, make sure I didn't. Someone really doesn't like Madolche, which the deck is kind of silly to play against, but it's not too much different than what you would expect. Ticket's an interesting card, and I mentioned that in my article. It's very much like Wind Up Factory. It's very much like Black Whirlwind. It's these advantage generating machines. The problem that you kind of get into, maybe not so much with windups, but you definitely get into it with Madolche. It used to be a problem with windups, even more so. Is that it's fine if they're gonna just do this to build advantage. Like it's fine. Like they can do this, they can get a bunch of cards, and they can do whatever. It's kind of like Gateway of the Six, bar the infinite loops that you can pull with that, which is kind of derpy. But the idea is that, with Ticket and all this stuff, getting your cards together, eventually you're going to get to a point where you can OTK doing this loop that's just going to wipe out your opponent's field and then let you attack for game, or at least put yourself into an unbeatable position. Windups did that initially with the whole hand loop, and they drop you down to one card, which sucked. Then they shifted to Shockmaster. And then after they have now been kind of pushed to the side of the format, it's been interesting to look at the deck. And one of the things I've always considered is windups without Shockmaster are a really cool deck. They're actually just really cool. They have a lot of neat plays. They don't just like they kind of interact within themselves. They've got a lot of stuff going for just themselves. They don't need to really interact with the opponent a whole lot until they actually go to make attacks or activate effects with their Xyz monsters. But very frequently they're kind of doing their own thing, and they play actually a lot like plants do. Now, with a lot of the other strategies in this format, everything is like trying to mess with you. Everything's trying to mess with your opponent. Between Fate banishing stuff, Kaiko banishing stuff from your graveyard, or Blaster popping things, Big Eye stealing things, Draco Sack popping things, Whatever it happens to be, it's usually all that advantage is being occurred, but then it's also being used against you to strip you of cards or to prevent you from using cards, and that's to me one of the bigger issues of the format. With Madolche, it's kind of the same thing, where you've got a lot of this advantage generation, but you also have this OTK with Taramisu that is kind of annoying, at least in the sense that it's the only real card in the deck that just strips your opponent of cards, just takes them away in very large numbers. Otherwise, the deck isn't too much different from things like maybe gadgets or, like I said, windups without Shockmaster. And because they're not shutting down all of your plays, they're just going to win on the grind game, which is cool. It's the same thing kind of that Fire Fist does, but Fire Fist 2 is stripping your opponents of cards. And this is just a conversation I've had with people lately about how decks interact with each other, and whether or not being able to, whether or not there should be a limit on how much you can interact with your opponent. I think the deck that interacts the most with your opponent is probably Dark World, because people really don't like it when their hand gets disrupted, and then you've got Grapha that's popping things and all this other stuff going on, and then it grinds your opponent out at the same time, and it's annoying to play against. Surprisingly, the whole grind mechanic and then messing with your opponent's cards is something you do find in Madolche, which makes it a bit of a pain to play against, and I think that might be why. I think that may be why some people don't like the deck as much. But that's something I hear about very rarely. Most people are pretty happy to see something that isn't dragons, that isn't prophecy, doing well. And the deck does have a really good matchup against dragons, and against prophecy. It's, depending on your build, it's pretty good. Can it lose out easily? Can it get derped on? Yeah, it can. It can get that first turn heavy storm and then get derped on pretty quickly. The deck doesn't have. It's very much a trap-based deck, back row heavy deck, and as long as those kinds of decks are not in favor, they're going to have a lot of struggle, or they're going to have a hard time playing against decks that can just go heavy storm some of the Draco Sack and start taking them out. Because if you look at Madolche, they don't really have a whole lot of ways to crack first turn setups, except to go set next turn, try to use all those traps to clear away that board. Because if you're sitting on, if you go like something like Dragosag Lad first turn against a lot of decks, they're pretty much gonna scoop, and I would say that it definitely. Madolche are no exception to that. They're definitely a setup builder. They have the setup breaking of Taramisu, though. So that's interesting. And how long are we going? Okay, about 13 minutes. And at least for me, that's what makes the deck dangerous. Maybe the whole advantage generation thing. We've seen this mechanic in the past, but to have that OTK ready to go, to have a card ready to go that just shuts everything down, blows up all your stuff, is really annoying. And Taramisu kicking cards back to the deck, it's like a really good version of Kodaris when that was first released. I remember having a lot of hype over that, and this card reminds me actually a lot of it. It's just this huge card that actually even kills Tengu, just kicks it back to the deck, so you can't even get Tengu's effect. But there's that. Mistake will be a good side deck card against them. Of course, it's not out yet. It comes out in Shadow Specters, which is quite a ways away. And then, yeah, that's pretty much all I think I have to say this week. Let's see. Number Hunters is out now, so of course we've got a lot of new stuff in there. Oh, and I'll make a mention of this. Excuse me. TCG Player now has Vanguard stuff, which to me is really cool. And if you guys do play Cardfight Vanguard, it's an awesome opportunity to be able to sell your cards, be able to buy cards from stores. I'm not sure what the status is on the store. The last time I checked, it was kind of incomplete on the pricing. So we just go in here and I will type in Crimson Impact Metatron. Let's see if we can get a price for this thing. And none. It is currently out of stock. What about Halo Shield Mark? And currently out of stock. How about Garmor? Great Silver Wolf Garmor? This was actually my first Vanguard card. It is currently out of stock. Yeah, it doesn't look like they're totally up yet. Look, I think they're still getting things ready, which is too bad because I'm pretty excited for it. But we'll see what happens. They've got all the search functions up. They've got double retro, but whatever. Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool for me. I might make some videos in the future on Vanguard. I'll see what happens. But that's about it from me, I guess. This has been a Madolche weekend, that's for sure. And then next week, we'll be talking about more post WCQ stuff. Actually, this week's article will be on the WCQ, some of the options there. Unfortunately, I did write it before a lot of the deck lists went up, so I was kind of I wrote some more general things than maybe I could have been more specific, but we'll see. I hope you guys enjoy that one. I think it was a very interesting event, a very predictable event, but a very interesting event. I don't think a whole lot happened that people were surprised by. I think maybe I was surprised that people were playing Last Day of Witch. Maybe, just a little bit. But yeah, I think that's it. So yeah, definitely check out the articles in the description. And until next time, then.